Whenever we're in Hyrule, we're always so busy running around collecting pieces of the Triforce and trying to defeat Ganon that we never stop to see what types of bourbon the kingdom has to offer. But let's face it, no matter how many times you destroy Ganon, he's always going to keep coming back. So why shouldn't we take just a little bit of extra time to do some bourbon hunting while we're on our quest? We're still going to spend time looking for item upgrades, heart containers, and Triforce pieces, of course. But Hyrule's a thriving kingdom with many shops and merchants. Why not make just a few extra stops along the way to see what bourbons are available there? Why don't you join us? Let's go! Well, here we are, just dumped in the middle of Hyrule with no directions. Hey, that was nice. He gave you a free whiskey glass to use. We are civilized folk, after all. I'm glad the game isn't asking us to guzzle bourbon from the bottle like some uncouth barbarian. That's no way to appreciate a fine bourbon or whiskey. Looked to me like it was a rocks glass. Kinda hard to tell, though. Don't forget that this is an 8-bit game, so that's probably the best rendering they could pull off, given the technical limitations of the system. There's no point spending any time on this screen. You can't cross the river yet. Nope, you'll have to turn back. Sorry. You can come back when you have a way to get over the water. It's nice to see that the Tektites haven't respawned yet, though. Ah, and we've encountered our first truly classic Hyrulean monsters of the day, Octoroks. I don't know, looks like a normal cave to me. Go inside, see what's in there. Nice. Looks like we've stumbled upon a local whiskey merchant. No, sorry, Chonk. You can't buy that one. Well, no. You haven't collected enough rupees yet. There you go. Hey, Evan Williams. Want to give it a try? Just open your inventory screen and select the whiskey glass, and we'll be ready to go. So here we have the first bourbon we were able to score on our journey, the Evan Williams Black Label. It is a popular brand and quite widely available, so it's no surprise to see the first shop we walk into carrying it. This particular bourbon is made by Heaven Hill Distillery. It's a straight whiskey with no age statement, so it's at least 4 years old, and it's quite reasonably priced. What did you pay for this again, Chonk? Only 15 rupees. Not bad. I don't actually know how to calculate the exchange rate from rupees to dollars, but that still seems like it's a pretty good price. So what's it like? Mostly sour on the nose, with some classic cherry or rhubarb notes. And some sweetness too. Sweet and sour on the attack, with more cherry, brown sugar, and caramel. A little bitterness on the finish, and a hint of tangerine, perhaps? Some sort of citrus, anyway. I think there's a little breadiness tucked in there as well. So, this might not be a bourbon that excites you, but compared to the price you pay, it's pretty great. And it's bottled at 43% ABV, so you get just that little bit more than the legal minimum, which is a nice touch, I think. I'm gonna give this one 2 stars and 3 legs. So I don't think this is gonna make you fall in love, but it's a great table bourbon. It's good enough to be enjoyed neat, and inexpensive enough to be used for just about anything. So, I do remember having a previous bottle of this that tasted a little green and woody, like chewing on a sapling, but I'm not getting any of that from this bottle. I'm not detecting any real off notes here. Inexpensive, but decent is a good way to describe this one. Alright, Chonk, ready to get back to the game? Alright, let's go. So, like many big bourbon brands, Evan Williams claims to take its name from a long-deceased bourbon ancestor. They're calling him Kentucky's first commercial distiller from back in the 18th century. Of course, that's assuming that the marketing can be taken at face value. But after doing some light research, it seems like the actual historical details about the man Evan Williams are a bit more murky. So it could be true, but who knows? Even more Octoroks here? Aren't there any other types of wildlife? I wonder if these Octoroks weren't imported from a foreign kingdom and then they bred like crazy here and crowded out all the other species. Indeed, an invasive species, if you will. Looks like they've pretty much taken over this corner of Hyrule. Hold on. The manual actually doesn't say much about them. Just that they're some sort of land octopus. And that they spit rocks at you. Yeah, that would make them some sort of biological catapult. Maybe. I don't really know. In some of the later Zelda games, you see more Octoroks living in water and fewer on land, which makes more sense to me. I'm no biologist, but tentacles seem like an appendage that are not well adapted to land travel. But again, I'm no biologist. Wait, hold on. There's a secret entrance if you burn that bush there. The lower left one. There you go. Eagle Rare? That's kind of a big ask. I don't know how well distributed Eagle Rare is in Hyrule, but I haven't seen that on the shelf where we are in years. And how much did he give you to buy that? 10 rupees? That's not going to come even close to the price of buying a bottle. I could easily see you spending several times as much. I guess the good news, though, is that if you never find a bottle here, you may have just pocketed 10 rupees. It's another whiskey shop, but woof, look at these prices. This must be a really high-end whiskey specialist. You should probably just leave. You can't afford any of these yet. No, you need more rupees. Those are Zoras. They're kind of like fish people. Think creature from the Black Lagoon. Zoras are kind of like that guy. And they're gonna keep shooting those fireballs at you. And until you get a stronger shield, there's nothing you can do except run away. Wait, there is another secret entrance here. It's the 5th or 6th bush from the right? 5th, I think. That's it. Hey, a gift from an old man. No, don't go for the meat. Get the whiskey. Ooh, Knob Creek. Nice. He didn't even ask you to pay for it. Thanks, old man. I know you're hungry. I'm gonna feed you later. You gotta watch out for those. Your current shield is much too weak to protect you from fireballs. No secret entrance there. Sorry. A lot happening on this screen. You better watch out. You're gonna get swarmed. Youch. You're taking some damage there. Ooh, fairy! Quick, grab her and eat her. And then her life force will be transferred to you. Yum, yum. Nope. No secrets there either. Too bad. Okay, this should be the entrance to level 1, the first dungeon. Hey, before you get too deep into it, you want to try that Knob Creek you just got? Okay, so go to your submenu, select the whiskey glass, and then pull up your whiskey inventory screen so you can change bottles. There you go. Now select Knob Creek from the list, and we'll try it out. Perfect. So here we have the Knob Creek Small Batch. It's distilled by Jim Beam, comes at 50% ABV, a nice strength, and carries a 9-year age statement. Not bad at all. And we were gifted this bottle by an old man we found in a cave, so luckily for us, we didn't even have to pay for it. Yep, good deal. So what do we think of the old Knob Creek 9-year-old? got a good amount of brown sugar and caramel. And some sour rhubarb and baking spices. It's got a bit of dusty old wood in there too, I think. It does leave the impression of having some age to it. Slightly burnt cinnamon toast here as well. Like cinnamon bread toasted on a 4 or 5 setting, when really it should have been toasted on 3, medium brown. The attack is a little bit hot for me, actually, so personally, I would usually add some water to this. I know that a lot of people probably wouldn't, but for my palate, I tend to prefer my whiskey between 40 and 50%. Greater than that, it's usually just too hot for me. I mean, it tastes adequately aged, and this is still reasonably priced at the moment. It's pretty tasty and continues to be a good bang for your buck. Or rupee in this case. I'm going to give this one 3 stars and 2 legs. Decent age, decent flavor, decent proof, decent price. What's not to like? Alright, Chonk, are you ready to start the first dungeon? Okay, here we go. That's right, I did say Knob Creek was made by Jim Beam. Well, maybe they didn't want to call it the Jim Beam 9-year-old. I don't know. Could be it wasn't sexy enough. Maybe they thought they had to give this one a new and different story. I don't know. Seems like every bottle of whiskey needs an origin story these days. They're as bad as superhero movies. It's all part of the art of seduction. Or you could just call it marketing horseshit. You're not allowed to just say, here's our whiskey, these are the ingredients, it's this many years old and bottled at this proof. We worked really hard on it, so we hope you like it. You gotta have a whole story. That's the rule. No, what you're not seeing is that nobody would buy a whiskey that didn't have at least a couple paragraphs of irrelevant storytelling on the bottle. Nope, sorry, you can't bomb that wall. There are some bombable walls in this dungeon, I'm pretty sure, but you'll just have to test some different spots. So, Knob Creek's story is that it claims to be named after the creek that ran through Abraham Lincoln's childhood home. Well, that probably means it just ran through his property, either out back or in front of his house. I'm not sure which. I doubt the creek ran right through the center of his house, as though he had to build a bridge over it so he could get from his bedroom to his bathroom. Oops, my mistake. You're right. He almost certainly would have had an outhouse, not a bathroom. I'm pretty sure they didn't even have indoor plumbing back then, actually. Anyway, as the story goes, Abraham Lincoln's parents bought a house and a piece of property. But when they arrived there, they discovered the realtor hadn't told them that there was a creek running in between the house and the outhouse, so nobody living there could go to the bathroom without crossing the deadly Knob Creek. So, Abraham Lincoln took his sharpest axe, chopped down the tallest, strongest cherry tree he could find, and built a bridge to the outhouse out of it. Then he gathered up his family and said to them, I cannot tell a lie. You can all now safely cross Knob Creek to the outhouse for pooping. And they lived happily ever after. Oh yeah, you're right. He did get shot. I guess they didn't live happily ever after. You might be too young to remember this, but there was a day not that long ago when Knob Creek lost its age statement. It happened in an age when the bourbon supply couldn't keep up with the demand. That's right. I also remember when the age statement came back. That was a very happy day. No, not every bourbon is so lucky. The Elijah Craig small batch lost its age statement around the same time, and to this day it's never come back. Yes, it's very sad. But that, my boy, is a tale for another time. Looks like this room's got a bunch of gumdrops that sprung to life or something. Yeah, if I had to guess, I would say some sort of perverse necromancer was reading incantations from the Forbidden Book of the Dead while munching on some Dots candy. Or jujubes or juji fruit or something like that. And then this happened. Once again, the dark arts turns harmless candy into savage, mutated creatures that bounce around menacingly. Nope, that door is activated secretly. See? What's going on in here? Huh. Nice. Looks like we got another whiskey for our collection. Want to try it out? First, go to your inventory screen, select the whiskey glass, and then go to your whiskey submenu and select the Old Granddad. There you go. Then we can see what it tastes like. Okay, so here we have the latest whiskey we discovered. It was given to us by the old man trapped in the first dungeon. Yes, that's true. We also got our last whiskey from an old man. But that was a different old man. And we found him trapped in a cave, not a dungeon. Yeah, that seems to be how Hyrule handles its elderly population. They just seal them away inside caves and dungeons. I don't think anyone would call that the most humane solution to an aging population, but I'm sure it's very cost-effective. Anyway, let's see what we have here. This one is the classic Old Granddad, a bourbon brand that goes back well over a century, and was originally created by Raymond B. Hayden, who named it after his grandfather, Basil Hayden, who happens to be the eponymous Old Granddad in this case. So another bourbon named after a bourbon pioneer who died over a century ago. And another one that's currently distilled by Jim Beam. I'm starting to see some patterns here. Anyway, how's it taste? It's light and sweet on the nose. I definitely feel like I'm detecting a little rye spice here. At least I think I am. I don't think it's just the power of suggestion. Yeah, Old Granddad famously uses a higher proportion of rye grain in their bourbons, and they seem very careful to include that in all their marketing materials. The nose has a sour quality and is a little bit herbal. I've heard some people say they detect dill in their rye-forward whiskeys. I think I might be getting some of that here. There's a sweetness too, although it's more towards the lighter simple syrup end of the spectrum, and not as much towards caramel or dark brown sugar. I don't detect any baking spices really, or anything like that. The color is fairly light, which should come as no surprise since it isn't very old, though it is at least 4 years old since it's a straight whiskey with no age statement, and it's watered down to 40% ABV, and I'm sure that lightens the color as well. It's fairly gentle on the attack, not rough at all. And I'm sure that's partly because of the low proof, but I've seen distilled spirits be rough even at 40%. Ever tasted Cointreau neat? After a couple minutes, the sweetness seems to be deepening a little bit, moving towards light brown sugar. I wouldn't say this is packed with flavor, but it's perfectly enjoyable. It's very inexpensive, too. So, like the Evan Williams Black Label, it's a great value and there's nothing to really complain about for the price they're asking. I'm going to give this one 2 stars and 3 legs. Another great table bourbon. Good for sipping, mixing, or even cooking if you're into that sort of thing. Alright, let's get back to level 1, the Eagle Dungeon. Yep, Old Granddad is made at Jim Beam Distillery, just like Knob Creek. Although Jim Beam's relationship to the Old Granddad brand is a little bit different than its relationship to Knob Creek. Well, Knob Creek is a brand Jim Beam invented from scratch in the relatively recent past. Old Granddad, however, is a bourbon brand that had already existed for about a century before Jim Beam bought them. OGD was a smaller fish that got eaten up by a larger one. Yeah, in a way it's kinda too bad that happens. Though as it turns out, Jim Beam wasn't immune to getting gobbled up either. They themselves were bought just a couple decades later. Circle of life, I guess. Who? That guy? Well, the portrait on the bottle is actually said to be the Old Granddad himself, Basil Hayden Sr. And there's actually an interesting origin story behind that. Do you want to hear it? Well, near the end of the 18th century, Basil Hayden Sr. immigrated from Maryland to Kentucky, settling in a county near Bardstown, which was a blossoming center for bourbon production at the time. There, he began a career farming and distilling, and started producing a bourbon of his own. Unlike the other nearby distillers who were making bourbons overwhelmingly dominated by corn, Basil set himself apart by introducing a heavy dose of rye grain into his bourbon. Over time, Hayden Sr.'s bourbon grew in renown, and eventually became so popular that the other local distillers struggled to sell their own bourbons. As hard as they tried, they seemed unable to compete with the power of Basil Hayden's rye spice, and eventually found their distilleries in danger of bankruptcy due to lack of sales. Because of this, the distillers decided they needed to take matters into their own hands if they were to have any hope of preserving their livelihoods. They began holding secret meetings to decide what to do with old Basil Hayden Sr., and finally they concluded that they had only one choice. Quickly they settled on a plan and put it into action. Late one night, the distillers set out, concealed by the darkness of the new moon, and abducted Basil from his home, taking him blindfolded to a rick house owned by one of the other distillers. There, they subjected Hayden to the most extreme punishment they could conceive. They had him poisoned, stabbed, shot, hung, stretched, disemboweled, drawn, and quartered. Basil was a tough old man, though, and before his head expired, he uttered this ominous prophecy: "Death is but a door, time is but a window. I will return." Now, dawn was approaching, and the distillers wanted to dispose of Hayden's body under cover of darkness, so they left his remains lying on the rickhouse floor, planning to regroup the following night to finish the cleanup. What they didn't realize, however, was the fact that Basil's grandson, Raymond B. Hayden, had witnessed the entire event. When the distillers abducted Basil, Raymond had snuck out of the house and followed them to the rickhouse where they committed this terrible crime. He had slipped inside shortly after they did and hid himself behind a bourbon barrel while the grisly scene played out. Raymond vowed that he would take his revenge on these wicked men and put to right the terrible wrong they had committed there. Once dawn arrived and the distillers had all left, Raymond stepped out from his hiding place to see what they had done to Basil up close and quickly resolved that he must revive his beloved grandfather by any means necessary. However, Raymond knew that he had to preserve the pieces of Hayden Sr. until he could determine the most suitable method to revive him, so he sealed them inside a barrel of high-proof bourbon so they wouldn't begin to decay, and rolled the barrel back to his home, hiding it in his cellar. From there, Raymond determined he would gain the skills needed for bodily reanimation and left for Germany to study natural philosophy and chemistry at the University of Ingolstadt. After graduating and armed with fresh knowledge and techniques, Raymond returned to Kentucky and began experimenting on Basil's preserved remains in an effort to revive him. Tragically, all of these attempts failed, and in a final act of desperation, Raymond foolishly turned to the dark arts. He performed several occult rituals designed to trap the spirit of Basil inside a portrait of the old man. With the ghost of his granddad sealed securely inside the image, Raymond then mastered the art of distilling himself and became an expert bourbon producer in his own right, using Basil's original rye-heavy grain recipe and putting the portrait of his old granddad on the label of every bottle of bourbon he would make. Yes, the portrait of Basil Hayden Sr. appearing on bottles of old granddad today is the same portrait Raymond used to imprison his spirit. And it's said that the ghost of Hayden Sr. longs to return someday in bodily form so that he can reclaim his uncontested dominion over the bourbon industry. And a rumor has been circulating ever since that if you stare into the eyes of Basil Hayden's portrait for too long, he just might leap into your body and take possession of you in order to re-establish his bourbon empire. Yeah, so be careful. Well, that's just the rumor. I'm only telling you what I heard. Yeah, I guess it could be just an urban legend or a tall tale. I don't really know. Here you are, level 1's final boss, Aquamentus. Well, it's a dragon with a unicorn horn according to the manual. And wings that are far too small for its body size, apparently. Yeah, no way this thing is able to fly with those tiny flaps. There you go. Great job. Ah, finally, we've reached the Triforce room. What are you waiting for? Just grab it. What are you doing, Chunk? No, boy! You were supposed to grab the Triforce shard. This is one of the few times in the game where you should not grab the whiskey. Can we even finish the game now? I'm pretty sure you need all 8 Triforce shards to have any hope of defeating Ganon. Now we can only get 7. Well, yeah. Great. This is just great. So I suppose we're at least gonna taste it then. This bourbon better be worth leaving Hyrule to wallow in darkness for generations to come. I have my doubts, but we might as well try it anyway. So here we have the bourbon we discovered at the end of the first dungeon. The same bourbon Chonk foolishly chose instead of the Triforce shard, which we need to defeat Ganon. Yeah, you should be sorry. You're like that boy Jack in Jack and the Beanstalk. Instead of trading the family cow for food, you chose to exchange it for magic beans. And now look where we are. Well, since we've got this thing, we should at least taste it. Looks like we have a Four Roses bourbon here. Four Roses is another bourbon brand that has a pretty deep history, in this case going all the way back to the late 1800s. And like most brands that have been around that long, they've had their share of ups and downs over the years, in addition to numerous changes in ownership. They've done pretty well in the modern era, though. Over the last couple decades, they've established themselves as one of the major Kentucky bourbon brands. The bottle here happens to be the Four Roses Small Batch Select. So, not just the regular small batch, oh no. This one is the upgraded small batch. It's a little bit higher proof, which is nice. It isn't chill filtered, that's good. And unsurprisingly, it's almost twice the price. Beyond that, the differences between this one and the regular small batch are a little unclear. They say it's around the same age, 6 to 7 years old, so I guess we'll just have to trust them that it's worth the price jump. Anyway, what's it like? The nose has got caramel, butter, some pepper, and a little mint. It's not really a slap-you-in-the-face nose, kinda subtle actually. The attack's a little hot, but not bad for the proof. It has some butterscotch in there, and maybe the suggestion of thin mint cookies and maple candy. You might compare the profile of this one to a blend of brown sugar and butter, spread over a slice of rye toast and garnished with a sprig of mint. It's good. My only criticism of this is that, for me, it isn't Moorish. I'm gonna give it 3 stars and 2 legs. My other issue with this one is that it costs just a bit too much for me to casually enjoy it, so I feel the need to treat it like it's slightly precious, even though my love for it doesn't quite reach that precious level. That is to say, it's priced at a point where it demands my attention, but it doesn't feel like it quite earns it. Actually, the original Four Roses small batch was one of the bourbons that helped me gain an appreciation for bourbon, as there was a time when I mostly preferred Scotch. And I could kinda see how the Four Roses small batch line could potentially act as a bridge between the world of bourbon and the world of single malt whiskey. Their use of oak here is a bit more subtle and restrained. They're not clobbering you over the head with it like some bourbons can. Though, over time, I've come to appreciate having more oak in my bourbon than I used to. I'd say I actually prefer the Four Roses single barrel to their small batch bourbons. It's priced a little lower than this one. It's a bit older, so it tends to have a little more oak in it, and it's only 2% ABV lower, so, at least for me, it's a better value. That one I can wholeheartedly recommend. This one's still good, but it isn't quite what I'm looking for. I don't think it'll end up being a repeat purchase bourbon for me. Well, what do you think, Chonk? Was this bourbon worth more than a Triforce shard? Yeah, it better be. So, like I said, I don't know if we can still beat the game now. But, since we're already here, I think we'll stick around anyway, to probe every corner of Hyrule to see what other bourbons they have. And who knows, maybe we can still find a way to defeat Ganon somehow. Yeah, you never know. So, we hope you'll join us next time where we look for more bourbons and get ready to conquer level 2. See you then.
Death is but a door, time is but a window, I will return.
Hey, is there somebody down there? Hello?